Today I'm going to be checking the throttle bodies on my 2014 Super Tenere ES to see if they're in sync. My son just bought a 2014 Super Tenere and he's going to be doing his first check, so I thought I'll make a little video for him and then publish it for the rest of you owners. I did a little preparation work here. Here's the tools that I use to do this. This is a 10mm ratcheting wrench. Pliers, you might need that to help you get the one vacuum cap off. A nice small screwdriver to adjust the throttle bodies. Need a 10mm wrench to loosen this pivot bolt right here so we can raise the tank. And then a 4mm Allen wrench. So that's the same size. To get the side covers off. Speaking of that, I've also gone ahead and taken this side cover off right here. I want to access this bolt, two bolts, one on each side, that hold your tank in place. And you'll notice that's a hex head, 6mm hex head bolt that takes a 10mm wrench. And I use a ratcheting wrench on the other side so that I don't have to take the whole panel off. I just simply take out this screw, and this screw, and then I can pry it out here enough that I get my 10mm hex head right there, the ratcheting wrench, loosen that up with the wrench, and then I take that bolt out, and then the tank is ready to raise. Before we raise the tank, we need to make sure that we go down here and take these two hoses out of the holder because they're attached to the underside of the tank, and we need to give them some slack so they'll come up with the tank. Don't know if you can see very well down there, but this is how I reach in. I pry this cover out with my left hand, and then I use my ratcheting 10mm to loosen that screw, and then when it's real loose I go in there with my fingers and remove it. Then on the other side I've already replaced this bolt with a hex head bolt, and so I just use that same ratcheting wrench and remove this, and then the tank will be ready to raise. Otherwise it takes a 5mm Allen wrench, which is not hard on this side, but it's hard to get in on the other side. And here's a method I use to hold the tank up. Looks like it's about 90 degrees, and I just take a tie down strap here, put a microfiber cloth there to protect the tank, and just use that to hold it up. And you can see there's the hoses that we released on the bottom, plenty of room there. And then the throttle bodies are right down here. And this one, you'll see, has a little sensor on that, and we're going to have to leave that sensor operational when we do the testing, and I'll show you how we accomplish that in a bit. On this side, on the right side throttle body, we've got a little vacuum cap. Sometimes it'll just slide off with that snap ring on there. Sometimes you've got to use those pliers. Also, I found on my previous Super Tenere that I was getting a erratic idle. Sometimes it idle fast, and I found out this cap was cracked. So that was a permanent vacuum leak. So a little trip to the auto parts store for another vacuum cap, and that cured that problem. So I've now removed that vacuum cap. I use the little cheap old pliers that come in the toolkit, but good enough to get that off of there. And there's the vacuum port that we'll be hooking up one side of our instrument that we're going to use to check the balance of the two throttle bodies. And here's that vacuum sensor I was talking about. So the first thing I've got to do is remove this hose, and then we'll temporarily be replacing that with the hose from our test instrument. Okay, for test instruments, what I use, I found to be really easy to use, is called a Harmonizer. Unfortunately, the gentleman that made these passed away just about a month or so ago, so they're going to be hard to find. But I'd used a Twin Max before, and that was pretty good, but this thing is just so easy to use, and it's very accurate. And on one end I put a little vacuum T fitting, so this will go One side of that will go to the throttle body, the other side will go to that vacuum sensor that we just talked about. Okay, now perhaps you can see how I've got that little hose with the T-fitting, and I've got the vacuum sensor right here, the port on the throttle body right there, and this hose here is going to my harmonizer. So on the other side, I've just got to run this hose across there and hook it up where we remove that vacuum cap. Okay, here's that vacuum cap, and I'm going to hook the other hose that goes to the harmonizer up to that little port right there. And then we're ready to test. Now your bike should be warmed up in regular operating temperature before you try this. So if you just have it sitting there and hasn't been run, then start it up and watch your coolant temperature. Once it gets above 140, then you're warmed up, and then you can go ahead and check it. Here's my dash. As you see, the coolant temperature is low. So I'm going to let that sit here and idle until it gets on up to 140, which will just take a few minutes. That's the temperature they recommend that you run it up to before you check the oil. So I figure if they think that's warmed up, then I think that's good enough for me. Okay, we're at 145. As you can see, the RPMs have settled down to a nice idle. So we're ready to start the test. The first thing, I'm going to turn it off and calibrate the harmonizer. I'll show you one thing first on the throttle bodies. This is the right hand side one. You see it had a little bit of white paint on there on the adjusting screw, and this is supposed to be the reference one. In other words, we set this one and then we adjust the other one so that it matches this. Now that's in the United States, these came from the factory they're all the way closed. Many of us found we like to do like they did in Europe, for instance, and they came from the factory with these open 3/4 of a turn. So that's what I've done on mine, and I like it that way. So we'll see where we are now. Okay, the harmonizer is pretty simple, and it's even got the instructions right on there. I don't know if you can make it out. Okay, engine off, connect the vacuum ports, press and release the button, then wait for calibration, and then we start the engine. Okay, we'll just do that then. There's the button, press and release. It's going to go through the calibration. Calibrating, please wait, it says. Engine off or disconnect hoses. Calibrating, please wait. Okay, there you are. It's ready to it's calibrated now, so ready to start the engine. Uh-oh. Okay, I checked mine recently, so they're pretty close right now. If you can see that, it just says, right there, it's pretty much 0. Settled out really nice. I'll show you where the adjustment is, though, or how it changes. This throttle body, the adjusting screw is right there. So as I turn that, you can see how it changes. I'm -3 millibars there. I'm going to go back towards 0. There it's 0. Very good. And that's it. All we do now is shut off the engine, put everything back together. Got any questions? Send me an email, fredz43@yahoo.com, or see fredz43 on the Yamaha Super Tenere forum. Thanks.